is the 77 WABC minicast.
Now let's bring in Kimberly Strassel of the Wall Street Journal. Kimberly, we just talked to Governor Patterson, former Governor David Patterson, who's on the ground there in Chicago. And he said, boy, they are gearing up for a lot of these crazy protesters. You wrote a really powerful column about how the Democrats, there are so many sort of the radical left, and many people would even put Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, in that category.
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, if you look at these groups that are saying they're going to come, the coalition to march on the DNC, there's 150 groups, but what's not getting as much attention is that there are some others that are outside of that coalition, outfits like Samadoun and Behind Enemy Lines. These are things that agitate for direct action. They have been busing people in. They are giving them training sessions. They're talking about getting into the streets to shut down Genocide Joe and Killer Kamala. A couple of them have posters out saying, "Make it great," like 68. So everyone's making it very clear that they intend to actually go a bit wild out there. And this has been coming for a long time because this faction of the party, Democratic leaders did not tell them no when they got going back in the wake of the George Floyd moment. And they haven't been told no up until now. And this conflict has been coming, and it's likely to happen next week in Chicago.
Judge Weinberg.
Kim, that's exactly right. As I read your column today, I said, absolutely. What they've done is they've created their own monster. They haven't reined these people in. They haven't condemned them. In fact, they've been apologists for them, Kim, all these many years. And they continue to be apologists for them. They looked the other way in the demonstrations, in the attacks on the Jewish community in the colleges. They explained away it was no big deal in Minneapolis when it was being burned down. It cost $500 million. You have a governor who's not going to run for vice president. Said nothing wrong with it. His wife likes smelling the tires. I mean, what's wrong with these people?
Well, absolutely right, Judge. And, you know, the reason they didn't shut it down in the beginning is because they wanted it to happen. They complemented their theme of racism and disorder under President Trump in 2020. And here's the thing that also is mind-boggling to me. I was just hearing some Democrats on television. Of course, now, belatedly, some of them are saying, you know, this is outrageous. This is a very small faction of radicals. They're not representative of the Democratic Party. I don't know how you can say that when clearly those voices were what made Kamala Harris choose not to go with a Josh Shapiro because he was Jewish. And because these groups, that element of the party said no. So you can't pretend they aren't part of your coalition. You can't just adopt them when you want them to and then cast them out as something you don't recognize when it's useful.
You know what? The other thing, too, Kim, as we're talking about all this stuff, Kim Strassel, I think about two moments. There was one where Joe Biden, he got interrupted. It was at a church. And he's like, no. Let that protester who's saying these horrible, vile things, let that protester speak. It was almost like condemning people for trying to get rid of the protester who was disrupting.
And showed sympathy for the...
Showing sympathy.
He showed sympathy. He didn't just say, let him speak. He said they have a point.
Yeah, they have a point. And Kamala Harris, Judge, did the same thing just recently. Somebody interrupted her and she said, I respect your opinion. As opposed to get the heck out of here. I'm talking to these people about something important. I mean, it's like they're embracing them, to your point.
Well, and by the way, I would lay down on the train tracks for the right to free speech, but I think what's been confused, in particular by Democrats.
By the way, I wouldn't lay down on the train tracks, but I might come close. But go ahead.
Well, I'm a big libertarian that way.
By the way, I am too. I just am scared of train tracks. But go ahead, Kim.
I love train tracks, so that's probably the difference maybe between us. I might do it just for fun, nothing to do with free speech. But anyway,
you're great. Thanks.
Carol's a Pauline on the train.
She's a diehard. She's a diehard.
And that's fine, but I think what Democrats and these leaders are failing to make the distinction between, and this gets really key because it gets to what was happening on campus. sure, everyone has a right to peacefully protest within the bounds of the law. It's also nice when they occasionally also have some respect for other people's space and for good manners as well, too. But what was happening on campuses was not peaceful protest. It was harassment. It was the shutdown of campuses and whole areas of it. It was being unlawfully camped in against the rules of the campus. This was not what's happening. And they sort of condoned that for a while, saying everyone should be able to engage in protest. If people aren't going to stand up and make the moral distinctions between peacefully protesting and breaking the law, that just shows a lack of leadership at the top level.
Although, did you see the other day the praying grandmother who was out at January 6th? She's now going to have to serve jail time because she was near the Capitol on January 6th. This woman who was talking, she was in the Capitol, I think, for 10 minutes. And yet these people that you talk about, they get a free pass.
Well, and that has been, look, this all ties back into the other headline of this week. Minouche Shafik, who was the Columbia University president, she's resigned. And, you know, one aspect of this is that even when some of these college administrators dared to actually stand up to these protesting, demonstrating, law-breaking students and interlopers on their campuses and call the police, a lot of them ended up getting get-out-of-jail-free cards. There was no ramification. They weren't even suspended or barred from school. I mean, what kind of message does that send? And if they wonder why more and more mobs of young people are coming to Chicago potentially to engage in similarly unlawful behavior, it's because the message that gets sent by this from the top is that there are no consequences for that.
Yeah, that is really scary. Wall Street Journal, Kimberly Strassel, Ed Cox.
Kim, I've got a big question for you. Going back to my first convention, 68. And I always wondered, why do the protesters go to the Democratic convention and not when we in the Republican side really disagree with them the most? Why aren't they protesting at the Republican convention?
Be careful what you wish for, Ed.
Yeah, exactly. Don't invite them, Ed.
How do you explain that, Kim?
Ed, so I think that's an absolutely really insightful point. And here's my response. I was reading a good piece in The Nation this week, which obviously is a left-wing publication, and it quoted one of these protesters, demonstrators, and she said it very succinctly. She said, the Republicans are never going to listen to our ideas, but we can force the Democratic Party to change. In other words, they don't care about this election that's coming up in November. What they see here is an opportunity to revolutionize the Democratic Party from within and take it over and force it to adopt its positions.
Yeah, they know that they can at least hold some sway. And look, you brought up the classic point. She had a choice of going with Josh Shapiro or a Mark Kelly, and she picks Tim Walz. And we were just talking about that earlier, Ed, that look at the two choices she has made so far, the two sort of big decisions. One was picking Tim Walz, who certainly, who loves smelling the tires when her city is burning, you know, in the riots of Summer of Love, as he calls it. And then the other choice is today she comes out with, the equivalent of the Maduro, Castro plan. I mean, Ed, what does that say to you?
This puts her clearly in the far left. Why did she do it? It does not make any sense politically.
Well, and again, you cannot make these distinctions. Okay, they're now trying to suggest that the people are going to show up next week in Chicago are some radical fringe. These are the people that they're no different than the squad members. They're no different than like prominent members of the Democratic Party in Congress. And they actually do represent a very large and influential bloc. It's still a minority, but it's an influential and loud bloc in the Democratic Party, which is the progressive side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see what happens. Look, I hope it's safe. But you're right. They have certainly with their words.
I got to go there. So.
Yeah. Oh my God. You got to call us. Give us a call from the scene there too, Kim, please.
We'll do that. But I'm not going to go anywhere where we have a lot of action.
Yeah. And stay away from train tracks too. Okay.
Exactly.
We love you.
Do.
Kim, thank you very much. Kim, great column.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. The great Kim Strassel there with the Wall Street Journal.